As you close your eyes and let your mind settle, allow me to take you back thousands of years to the soft sands and golden light of ancient Egypt, a world where love whispered along the Nile, and marriage was both sacred and poetic. Before we begin our journey tonight, I'd love to know, what time is it where you are? And where in the world are you listening from? Share it in the comments below. Chapter 1. The Dawn of Desire. Courtship in the Nile Valley. A gentle ending and a new beginning above all. Ancient Egyptian courtship was built on emotional connection. Love was not hidden or seen as weakness. It was cherished. Egyptian couples, even those of modest means, often described their spouses as beloved, as companions, as friends. This emotional depth would not end with courtship in many ways. It was only the beginning dot. As the seasons turned and love matured, couples took their bond to the next step. And while ancient Egypt did not require elaborate ceremonies for a union to be recognized, the moment two lives became one was still sacred, not just to the couple, but to their families, their communities, and even the gods. So now, as you rest beneath your own quiet sky, picture the Nile at dusk. Two lovers stand hand in hand, not just as companions, but as partners, ready to build a life, a household, a future. Their journey has just begun. Let us now drift gently into that. Next chapter, to the home, the rituals, and the sacred promise of Egyptian marriage. Chapter 2. Sacred unions. The rituals of marriage. The Nile flows steadily through the land, carrying with it not only water, but the passage of time. And with time, love matures into partnership. From the gentle spark of courtship, a deeper promise emerges, one rooted in home, trust, and mutual devotion. The young lovers we left at the riverbank now take their first steps together into married life. And though the records of ancient Egypt stretch across 3 millennia, the meaning of marriage, its power to bind hearts, households, and generations, remained a constant thread through time. Let us now follow them into the quiet rituals of union and the sacred bond of Egyptian marriage. What defined a marriage in ancient Egypt? To our modern minds, marriage may evoke images of formal ceremonies, elaborate vows, or legal documents. But in ancient Egypt, marriage was more about shared life than legalities. There was no grand religious ceremony required. No priest needed to preside. Marriage, instead, was viewed as a social and emotional agreement, a decision to live together, to share property, to support one another, and often to raise children. And yet, despite the absence of rigid ritual, marriage was still seen as sacred, a moment of personal commitment, often witnessed by family and honored by tradition. The essence of Egyptian marriage could be found not in spectacle, but in simplicity. If a man and woman chose to live together as husband and wife, if they shared a home, possessions, and spoke of each other as partners, they were, in the eyes of society, married. But make no mistake, though simple, this union carried profound weight. The marriage agreement, a mutual pact. While some unions were informal, others, particularly among the middle and upper classes, involved a written marriage agreement. This document, often created by a scribe, outlined the terms of the relationship, the division of property, support of children, and expectations of care. These were not cold legal contracts. In fact, many marriage documents contain tender language. A man might pledge to provide food, clothing, and affection. A woman might affirm her loyalty or her right to retain personal property should the marriage end. Perhaps most remarkably, these agreements often included protective clauses for women. If a man divorced his wife without cause, he was typically required to return her dowry, and sometimes more. This shows us something vital about Egyptian marriage, that it was not only a social bond, but a mutual understanding grounded in respect and responsibility. gifts, and the joining of households. Before a couple began their life together, there was often an exchange of gifts, not unlike the practice of a dowry in other cultures. Though the Egyptian custom was more balanced, the woman might bring linen, pottery, cosmetics, or weaving tools into the home. The man might offer furniture, jewelry, or cattle. These items were practical, yes, but they also symbolized a blending of two lives into one shared space. In wealthier families, marriage could involve land grants or property exchanges. But even among modest households, this union was seen as a small beginning toward building a legacy. And then there was the home. It might be a small mud brick house in a village, or a few rooms above a shop in a bustling town. There, side by side, the couple would begin their life, planting gardens, raising animals, and shaping daily life around the flow of the Nile. Symbols of union, clothing, and ritual, though there was no single wedding ceremony. Some rituals and symbols often marked the beginning of marriage. In some regions, the bride might receive new linen garments or elaborate jewelry, not only as gifts, but as signs of her new status. Perfume and kohl, already common in daily life, were used generously. The scent of myrrh or lotus oil filled the air, and mirrors, sacred to Hathor, the goddess of beauty and love, were polished bright. A small gathering of family and neighbors might occur, with music, dancing, or shared bread and beer. These were not formal affairs, but warm, joyful moments of recognition. In some cases, the couple offered prayers to Hathor or Isis, seeking divine blessing on their union. While not mandatory, such invocations reflect how love and spirituality were woven together. The role of family marriage was not only about two individuals, it was also a bridge between families. Parents might help arrange the practical details of the marriage, especially regarding property or inheritance. Siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins often lived nearby, creating a web of support around the new couple. Children were both hoped for and celebrated. Fertility was deeply linked to spiritual well-being, and statues of fertility gods, like Bais or Toret, the protective goddess of childbirth, were kept in the home. But more than just bearing children, marriage was seen as a partnership in all things, working together, managing the home, honoring the gods, and aging side by side. Wisdom of the ancients, how they viewed marriage. Ancient Egyptian literature, from wisdom texts to love poetry, offers us insight into what marriage meant to them. A passage from the instruction of Ani, a guide for how to live a virtuous life, says this of a man's relationship with his wife: make her heart glad as long as you live. Do not be harsh. Her eye is the path to your happiness. Such words reveal that Egyptians saw love and kindness as essential in marriage, not merely duty or structure. Even in legal disputes and divorce records, there is often language of fairness, care, and emotional investment. A marriage may have ended, but it did not begin without hope or sincerity. Everyday love. Most marriages were not royal, and most couples not wealthy. But in the quiet corners of Egypt's cities and farms, love still bloomed. A potter and a weaver might share a humble home. A scribe and his wife might raise children beside the marketplace. Their love might not be recorded in scrolls or carved into tomb walls, but it lived in shared meals, laughter, and trust. And when one partner passed away, the other would mourn deeply, placing offerings, writing prayers, and honoring their shared time on earth. This speaks to a powerful truth, that while the rituals of marriage were simple, the emotions beneath them were profound, a bond that echoed beyond life. As dusk settles on this chapter, the couple we've followed has taken their vows not before a crowd, but before each other, in quiet understanding, in shared purpose, have joined hands, begun a home, and honored the gods who watch over love. But in Egypt, The story of love did not end with marriage, nor did it end with death. For in this ancient land, it was believed that true love could follow a soul beyond the veil of time into eternity. Let us now walk softly into that belief as we explore the next chapter of love and marriage in Egypt, the part that lies not in homes or temples, but in tombs and stars, where lovers meet again and again forever. Chapter 3. Love Beyond Death, Romantic Ideals and the Afterlife in Life. They were companions, walking together beneath the sun, building a home of shared breath and laughter. But to the ancient Egyptians, love was never confined to life alone. It stretched across time, through the veil of death, and into the afterlife. As one world faded, another was believed to begin. And in that eternal realm, the bond between husband and wife was not only preserved, it was perfected. Let us now follow their story. From the threshold of their earthly home to the timeless chambers of the tomb, where love whispered in stone and memory bloomed forever. Death was not an end, but a passage. The ancient Egyptians held a worldview rooted in cycles. The Nile flooded and then receded. The sun died each evening and rose again. Crops withered and new life sprang forth. And so too did they believe the soul moved through cycles, from this life to the next, and possibly beyond. When a loved one passed away, it was not seen as a final loss. It was a journey, one that the living could support with offerings, prayers, and remembrance. But more than that, love itself was believed to persist. Husbands and wives who were united in life could be reunited in death, walking hand in hand in the field of reeds, the Egyptian version of paradise. The tomb is a second home in this land of pyramids and painted walls. Tombs were not gloomy places. They were homes for the dead, decorated with vivid colors, daily scenes, music, food, and family rituals. They captured the essence of life, so that it could be continued after death. And among the images so often preserved on these ancient walls were those of husbands and wives, seated beside one another, sharing a meal, holding hands, or gazing with tender admiration. It is striking to see love not as fleeting, but as something sacred enough to be carved in stone. These images weren't only for decoration. They were affirmations, declarations, reminders to gods and generations alike that love still lived, even after the heart had stopped. Inscriptions of devotion, some of the most touching love stories from Egypt come not from poetry or scrolls, but from tomb inscriptions, real messages written by husbands and wives to one another for eternity. In the tomb of a man named Mereruka, he is shown standing with his wife, Seshet. She touches him gently on the arm, a small gesture immortalized in limestone. Their eyes meet. Their children are nearby. In another, a woman named Aipu writes a message to her husband, calling him, "My beloved, my soul, the one who made my heart rejoice." Her words are carved into the wall beside offerings of bread and beer, as if she's still waiting for him to join her at the table. There is something deeply human in these expressions. It is not grandiose, not royal, simply love spoken softly, across the boundary of life and death. Marriage in the afterlife, the ancient Egyptian afterlife, often called the field of reeds, was imagined as a perfect mirror of earthly life, but without suffering, decay, or injustice. Fields were always green, water flowed clear, and families, including couples, were reunited. A married couple would not walk the afterlife alone. Together, they would plant crops, enjoy feasts, and live as they once had, but in eternal harmony. To ensure this reunion, funerary texts and coffin spells were often included with the deceased, asking the gods to allow loved ones to meet again. If a husband died first, he might write that he wished to wait for his wife. If a wife passed before her beloved, she might leave offerings for his journey, guiding him to her side when his time came. These were not just rituals, they were acts of love, a final promise whispered into eternity. I will see you again. Amulets and symbols of eternal love. Among the linen wrappings of the dead were placed amulets, small charms made of faience, gold or precious stone. These weren't just decorations. They were magical protections intended to guide and guard the soul on its journey. Some amulets symbolized love or partnership. The Tayat knot of Isis, which offered protection for women, or the Shen ring, a symbol of eternity, often used to represent everlasting union. A husband might be buried with a token from his wife. A wife might be wrapped in linen stitched with symbols of her marriage, or with her husband's name whispered into the folds by mourning hands. Even in burial, the idea was clear. You did not go alone. You carried love with you, and love waited for you on the other side. The Ba, in the reunion of souls in Egyptian belief, the human soul had many parts, one of which was the Ba, the unique spirit of a person, often depicted as a bird with a human head. The Ba could leave the body after death, but returned each night to rest, and was thought to seek out those it loved. Sometimes, tomb inscriptions speak of two Bas flying together in the sky, reunited, a beautiful metaphor for love unbound. By tying this idea that souls could rejoin, could seek one another in the afterlife, offered comfort and hope to a people who had already seen so much change, war, and natural hardship. And it still speaks to us today that perhaps the deepest form of love is not the kind that ends, but the kind that endures beyond endings. Songs for the departed, just as love poems were sung in life, songs were sung for those who passed, quiet, rhythmic verses recited during funerals or left behind in writing. Some songs warned the living not to wait too long to express their love. Others spoke to the dead as if they were still near. One such poem reads, I did not leave you. I am with you still, in the wind that moves the reeds and the water that fills the jar. Wait for me, and we will walk together again. These weren't grand eulogies. They were intimate reminders, echoes, footsteps through memory. A soft return, and so, as we leave the tombs behind, we find that love in ancient Egypt was not something fragile or fleeting. It was built into the very bones of their beliefs, shaped into statues, whispered in prayers, and etched into eternity. The couple we have followed, once young and shy beside the Nile, later building a home and life together, have now stepped into the field of reeds. Hand in hand, they walk among golden wheat and open skies. Their journey not ended, but simply changed as the stars rise over the desert and the hush of night deepens. We return with them to the stillness of memory. And gently now we move on, not to loss, but to another part of the story of how love in Egypt was not only eternal, but often equal, shaped not just by men, but by the voices and strength of women. Chapter 4. The Role of Women. Power, Devotion, and Partnership. In the hush of the afterlife, we glimpse two souls, not separated by death, but reunited by love. Their bond, eternal and equal, brings us to another layer of the story. Not just what marriage was, but who shaped it, who nurtured it, spoke within it, stood strong inside it. And to understand love and marriage in ancient Egypt fully, we must turn now to its women. For though centuries have passed, and dynasties have crumbled into dust, the voices of these women, mothers, wives, daughters, lovers, still echo through the sands. Let us walk quietly among them now, and listen. Womanhood in the land of the Nile among ancient civilizations. Egypt was uniquely generous in the rights and roles it granted to women. From the earliest periods of dynastic history, Egyptian women could own property, inherit wealth, initiate divorce, and represent themselves in court. They could run businesses, craft textiles, manage estates, and be witnesses in legal contracts. This autonomy was not universal in the ancient world, and yet in Egypt, It was woven naturally into daily life. And in the realm of love and marriage, women were not passive participants. They were partners, often equal in voice and in presence. A woman's right to choose, unlike many later cultures, ancient Egyptian society allowed for mutual choice in marriage. While family and status played their roles, women were often free to accept or reject suitors. Love poems from the New Kingdom period frequently feature female narrators, confident, playful, expressive. These women do not wait to be chosen. They speak their heart's dot in one preserved poem. A young woman says, "He is my desire, my sunlight. I will go to him in secret. I will not wait for the night to fall." These are not the words of someone silenced, but of someone alive in her own longing. And so it was. Women in Egypt were not merely admired. They were active in love, approaching, choosing, waiting, and walking away if they wished. Mistress of the house once married, a woman's domain was her home, not as a servant or inferior, but as the mistress of the house. This title, often recorded in legal and personal texts, was one of respect that she managed domestic labor. Yes, but also supervised the household economy, trained servants, raised children, and oversaw storage, food, weaving, and trade. In many ways, she was the steward of survival in farming families. Women helped with planting and harvesting. In cities, they sold goods in markets, made pottery, and baked bread in courtyard ovens far from being confined. Many Egyptian wives lived lives of dynamic involvement in both public and private spheres. Legal and financial power marriage contracts often included protections for the woman, stating that if the husband were to divorce her without cause, he would pay restitution. If he mistreated her, she had the right to leave. Women could keep personal property separate from their husbands. If the marriage ended, she was not left empty-handed. One recorded contract from the 6th century BCE includes these words: "Should he cast her out as wife, he shall give her silver, grain, and her belongings." And there are records of women initiating divorce, keeping land, and raising children independently. This was not a perfect society, no time is, but for its era, ancient Egypt offered. It's women rights that would not be seen again in many cultures for thousands of years. Love and loyalty, not obedience. The marriage ideal in Egyptian thought was not one of submission, but of partnership. Husbands were advised to treat their wives with kindness and attention. In the wisdom text of Tehotep, a father counsels his son, "Do not control your wife in her house. When you know she is effective, do not interfere." Other texts advise husbands to listen to their wives, to make her happy, to never belittle. Her love, loyalty, trust, and laughter. These were the foundations of marriage. Not fear, not dominance. Women of status, from villagers to pharaohs among the papyrus and pottery shards, we find not only ordinary women, but exceptional ones, names that rose like lotus flowers from the current of time. There was Tai, the powerful, wife of Pharaoh Amenhotep III. She advised him in state matters and was respected by foreign rulers. There was Nefertari, beloved of Ramses II, whose tomb in the Valley of the Queens is among the most beautiful ever discovered, its walls covered in celestial blues and golden prayers. And of course, there was Hatshepsut, a woman who did not just marry a pharaoh, she became one. These women weren't anomalies. They were the highest expression of a society that had long respected female strength, not just in royalty, but in love, widowhood, and remarriage. When a husband died, a wife grieved deeply. Offerings were left at his tomb, and prayers spoken aloud. But a woman's life did not end with widowhood. She could inherit property, raise children on her own, and even remarry if she wished, and many did. One letter preserved from the 21st dynasty describes a woman writing to her deceased husband, thanking him for the love they shared. but also gently informing him that she has remarried. This was not betrayal. It was the continuation of life, the understanding that love does not disappear, even when it changes form. The voice of the Egyptian woman to end this chapter. Let us return to where we began, with the voice of the woman, not silent, not hidden, but singing, speaking, remembering in the tomb of a noble woman named Tamit. A simple message is found. I loved my husband. I made his house joyful. I raised his children, and he never raised his voice to me. It is not a grand monument. It is not a pharaoh's boast. It is just one woman, in her own words, affirming that she lived with dignity, and that she was loved. And for thousands of years, that voice has not faded. A gentle passage forward now, as we leave the courtyards and kitchens of ancient wives, as we honor their strength, their grace, and their quiet power. We prepare to return once more to the language of the heart, for it was not only in life or law that Egyptian love was written, but in verses, songs, and dreams. In the next chapter, we drift into those poems, the tender words passed between lovers in ink and whisper. Chapter 5, Poetry and Passion, the written word of Egyptian love. We have walked with women through homes of strength and voices of quiet grace. Now we drift further still, into the place where hearts speak, not through law, nor duty, but through feeling. In the scrolls of ancient Egypt, among the calculations and contracts, lie fragments of something more delicate. Call on poetry. Simple, beautiful, and eternal. These poems were the love songs of the Nile. And tonight, as your eyes grow heavy and your breath deepens, we will listen to them together. Whispers from 3,000 years ago, soft as silk and still alive. The birth of a literary love. Egyptian civilization was among the first to embrace the written word, not only for administration or worship, but for expression. And among their most cherished literary forms was the love poem. Many of these were composed during the New Kingdom, around 1300 BCE, and were likely sung or spoken aloud. Some were written on papyrus scrolls, others painted on shards of pottery or limestone, fragile fragments of feeling, carefully preserved. But even in translation, their voices remained clear. These weren't royal declarations. They weren't grand epics. They were the everyday poetry of longing. Lovers speaking to one another across time, space, and silence. The language of the heart. Here is a poem spoken in the voice of a young woman. My heart flutters hastily. When I think of you. It lets me not act sensibly. It lets me not put on a dress, nor wrap my scarf around me. I do not put oil on myself. I do not comb my hair. In these words, we hear a timeless truth, that love disorients us. It is not just desire, but disruption, beautiful and bittersweet. Another poem, this time from a man. 7 days since I saw my beloved, and sickness has crept into me. My limbs are heavy. I no longer know how to walk. If she enters from the street, I will be well again. It is simple, almost humorous, and yet deeply moving. To love is to ache, to yearn. Even across centuries, this feeling is familiar. Sensuality and subtlety. Egyptian love poetry was often sensual, yet never crude. The body was praised gently, in metaphor and symbol. One famous verse compares the beloved's beauty to nature itself. Your love has penetrated all within me, like honey into water, like perfume into oil, like fruit into wine. There are no harsh declarations, only immersion. Love seeps in quietly. It becomes part of the self. And always there is reverence for the voice, the scent, the touch of the beloved. It is not possession. It is worship in softness. Female voices and desire remarkably. Many poems are written from the woman's perspective, direct, emotional, and unashamed. One woman says, I will lie down beside you, and the river breeze will blow, and I will Breathe your breath. Another speaks more boldly. Come to me tonight, my love. We will not sleep. We will sing, and I will hold you until the dawn. These are not submissive women. They are confident, desiring. Poetic dot in a culture where women held real rights and respect. It is no surprise that their voices rose in poetry. Two, not as muses, but as speakers. Love beyond looks physical. Beauty was praised in Egyptian poetry, but it was often the soul that truly captivated. A woman might be described as graceful, not just in body, but in walk, in laughter, in spirit. A man was loved not for power, but for kindness or the way. He spoke her name. One lover writes, I wait at the door for your footsteps, that my ears hear many, but none sound like yours. Another speaks of a simple joy. We sat together in the shade. He peeled a fig for me, dot. It was the best fig I've ever tasted. Love, it seems, lives in the small things, in glances, fruit, shadows, and sound. Where were these poems found? Many. Love poems were discovered near El Medina, a village where workers who built the royal tombs once lived. These were not nobles or scribes of the court. They were skilled laborers, craftsmen, and their families. And still, they sang of love. This tells us something profound, that passion was not a luxury, that poetry belonged not to kings, but to anyone with a beating heart. Symbols of love in language Egyptian writing, known as hieroglyphics, was itself poetic. The word for love, merit, was often represented with the symbol of a hoe or tool of cultivation. Why? Because love was something to be worked, nurtured, not passive, but active. Other symbols used in love poetry included birds, mirrors, perfume vials, and rivers. Each evoked mood, beauty, and memory. They painted feelings without having to. Name them. It was an art, soft, fluid, and full of space for imagination. Love letters and real emotion beyond poems. Real love letters have also survived. In one, a man writes to his deceased wife, I did not cheat on you when you lived, and now that you are gone, I have kept your shrine in the house. I sleep alone. Come to me in dreams. In another, a woman scolds her lover gently. You did not come to the river. I waited. The figs were sweet. You missed them. I forgive you. These are not the voices of myth. They are the warm, ordinary words of people simply in love, and occasionally annoyed. Were these poems sung? Yes, many of the love poems were likely performed with music, clapping, or gentle instruments like the harp or sistrum. At festivals to the goddess Hathor, who ruled over love and music. Couples would offer songs in her temples, asking for blessings on their relationships. It's easy to imagine a man singing beneath a window, or a woman whispering a song into her lover's ear. The night warm, the river near, their hearts full. What Egyptian love teaches us as we bring this chapter to a close. Let us sit quietly with what these poems have shown us, that love, when written down, whispered, or sung, survives longer than we do, that even across thousands of years, someone peeling a fig for the one they love still feels familiar. That longing, laughter, and waiting at a door still feel like home. Let the verses echo gently as you close your eyes. And now we prepare for one last chapter, a quiet reflection that brings all we've seen together, not of kings or queens, but of you, the listener, and the love stories that linger long after the words end. Chapter 6, Love, Legacy, and the Meaning of Belonging. We have walked beside lovers on the banks of the Nile, listened to poems whispered by candlelight, and stood in tombs where love was carved into stone. Now, as our story gently begins to close, we turn to a final question, one that echoes not only through ancient Egypt, but through every time, every heart. What does it mean? To love? To belong? To leave behind something that lasts? This chapter is not only about them, the Egyptians of long ago, but about us, and the threads of love and memory that connect us all. Love as a legacy for the ancient Egyptians. Love was more than a feeling. It was a legacy, something that lived beyond the self. It was there in the contracts that protected wives. In the tomb walls that showed couples dining together in the afterlife. In the names lovingly spoken in prayers, long after death. But love also lived in smaller, quieter places. In a woman tending the garden she planted with her husband. In a man saving his lover's last letter, folded into linen. In a child who watched their parents share a smile across a table. Love was not grand. It was daily. Deliberate. Enduring. End. That's what made it powerful. The web of belonging in Egypt. A person was never truly alone. They were part of something. A family. A community. A line of ancestors stretching back into myth. Marriage wasn't just about two people. It was a joining of homes, spirits, and sometimes entire villages. Even after death, the soul belonged to loved ones, to gods, to the land. Offerings were made not out of duty, but love. Spouses promised not just to remember each other, but to care for one another across the distance of time. This sense of belonging gave Egyptians a kind of peace, knowing that their love would matter, even after their footsteps faded from the earth. A hearth is heart in every household. Whether grand or modest, there was a hearth. A place where bread was baked, water warmed, oil poured into lamps, and beside it, couples shared stories. Children laughed. Hands reached for one another in the glow of evening. These scenes were rarely recorded by scribes. They were not considered history in the way battles or coronations were, but they were sacred. Because in the eyes of ordinary people, the potters, bakers, and weavers, love was the true center of life. Not gold, not conquest, but connection. The stillness between moments. The Egyptians had a deep respect for stillness, for the pauses between words, the silence between stars. Their poems often leave space. Their art, too, contains negative space, places the eye can rest. In their view, it was in these quiet places that meaning lived. And so we might ask, what is marriage, if not a space to rest within one another? What is love, if not the stillness between storms? They knew what we sometimes forget, that peace in partnership is not found in perfection, but in presence. If they could speak to us now, if those ancient couples could speak across time, the ones who wrote poems, raised families, buried one another gently and tenderly, what might they say? Perhaps, love each other well, not with grand gestures, but with daily kindness. Cherish the voice of your beloved. Laugh when you cannot sing if you're able. And when the day is done, sit beside one another and let the stillness be enough. There, wisdom isn't buried in tombs. It's alive in us. Whenever we choose gentleness, whenever we choose to stay, whenever we reach out in the dark and say, I'm here. The eternal flame. The ancient Egyptians lit oil lamps in their homes at dusk. Small, flickering flames that chased away night. These lamps were practical, yes, but also symbolic. Each flame was a promise, a reminder that warmth can persist, even in the cold, that light can be passed from one soul to another and never go out. So perhaps love is just this, flame. Lit in one life, carried into the next. Not always bright, not always easy to tend, but when shared with care, it endures. A final sleep beneath the stars. And now, dear listener, as the rain continues to fall softly and your breath grows slower, you may begin to feel that same warmth inside you, not just from the stories of others, but from your own memories of hands held, smiles exchanged, love given or received. The Egyptians believed that when you sleep, your soul journeys elsewhere, to places where the heart remembers. And peace is more than a dream. So let yourself drift. Perhaps you'll find yourself walking once more along the banks of the Nile, or seated beneath a fig tree with someone you once loved, or hearing the soft footfall of your beloved returning at dusk. Wherever you go in your dreams, may it be gentle, Dot, and may love, in all its forms, meet you there.